you. Thank you, Zach. I am so excited to be with Life City tonight. We've been watching Life City from a distance, of course, in Oklahoma City. I hail from the Oklahoma City Life.Church campus, and it's a lot of fun to be at that campus. But because I was at that campus actually partnered at the very beginning with Zach in seeing what he was doing here at Life City, and we've been friends ever since. It's just been a really great time. I think I was here, was it 4 years ago for a training right at the very beginning? It was certainly before you had this building. And this building is so fun to look at, just to walk through and see all of the love and the intentionality that's gone into this place to make it a home where God can do amazing things right here in Denver, Colorado. And so this is very exciting for both Megan and I to see this place and walk around and say, you feel like you're in Life Church. It's just really fun. It's fun to be here. I've got some cool things that I want to talk about tonight. And I know that I'm talking to the choir because anybody that will come to church on a Friday night loves the capital C church and loves the local church. And I understand, just like you do, that the local church is God's plan A to reach the world. And he does not have a plan B. He does not have a plan B. And so if we're going to be a part of God's heart and be involved in exactly what he's after, we're going to be involved in the local church. And we know that my mom used to tell me, if you want to be in the center of God's will, then you just look and see where God's busy and you go stand right in the middle of it. And you're right where you're supposed to be. And so I've always kind of lived by that. Well, I know that I'm in the center of God's will when I'm right in the middle of the local church. I know I'm in his will because that is his will to reach the world. And so it's really exciting. And anytime that I need reassurance for my calling, because it was at a pretty young age that I knew God was calling me into ministry, but I ran kicking and screaming from it for years because my dad was a pastor and I didn't exactly like him all the time. And right. And he was also married to the church. Like he gave the church his absolute 100%. And then my mom and all of us kids kind of got the dregs that was left over. And so it made us, pissy with him, really. We just didn't like him very much. And we ended up kind of feeling annoyed at the church. But God worked that all out and he got me back where he wanted me to be. But when I need to be reassured of my calling, God, you called me to do what I'm doing right now, then I have to remind myself of the power of the gospel because the gospel never changes. It remains the same and it remains very powerful. And no matter how fancy we get with this cool building and these fancy lights and great music and everything that we do, that cannot negate the fact that God's powerful gospel is what leads people to Jesus every single day. And so that gets me very excited. And I have to remember, and I'm going to speak this over you too, that we are a chosen generation, right? We are. The Bible says that we're a chosen generation. It also says right below that we're a peculiar people. Do you like being peculiar? I do too. I always thought that was the coolest verse because I did not want to be like other people. And not that I didn't like other people. I just wanted to be my own self. And I always thought, that's so fun that God wants me to be particularly peculiar. And so I've enjoyed that. But we are a peculiar people that are set apart to spread light. And so that's what I'm here to do tonight. I'm here to light a fire under each one of you for the next level of what God's getting ready to take you into at Life City. So dream team, get ready to do some dreaming and have some fun over what we're going to talk about. And here's where I'm going tonight. I want us to talk about what we have to do in our life in order to take on the heart of a pastor. Because whether or not you like this, you are a pastor. And I know a lot of people kind of they get real weird about that word. I used to get super weird about it too. Oh my goodness. My last name is Hershberger. So obviously that was my dad's last name. And every time somebody would say Pastor Hershberger to me, I would get all itchy. It was awful. It was just awful. But I started realizing what it truly means to be a pastor. And every one of us are called to be ministers of the gospel of peace. That's our job, is to spread the gospel everywhere we go. And so if we truly start believing that we are pastors and that everywhere we go and everything we do is through the lens of being a pastor, Life City Church will never be the same. If this room right here, just a few of us in this room, take on a pastor's heart and begin to think about ministry through the heart of a pastor, this church will never be the same. So that's where we're going to go tonight. Pastor Zach told me that it's all for Jesus this year. That's what you guys are talking about? All for Jesus? Okay, so when I think of all for Jesus, first, there's a couple thoughts that came in my head. I was teaching a baptism class for kids. I'm the LifeKids Pastor, by the way, at Life.Church. And so I get to do a lot of stuff in training leaders up to prepare them to be pastors, because we teach every leader that they're a pastor. But then I occasionally get to do stuff with the kids, and people are always like, that is so weird. You're the kids pastor and you barely ever work with kids. Well, that is true. I can sometimes barely stand them. I mean, kids like drive me crazy. Sorry, kids. They just drive me crazy sometimes. But I do love to lead leaders who are called to lead kids. That's what I love to do. But every once in a while, I get to do stuff with the kids. And so I was teaching a baptism class for kids. And this was so funny. I'm like talking about all have sinned and fallen short. Obviously, that's, in the Bible. And I said, how many is all? Well, they're looking at me and they're trying to figure it out. It's a really interactive class where the kids are talking the whole time too. And they're like, they're starting to like throw out numbers, like 1,000, 1,000,000. I'm like, no, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000, 1,000,000,000,000. And then one kid said, it's a lot. All is a lot. Well, that's what we're talking about here tonight too, all. And so my question is, what is all to you? Like, what is your all going to be? If you can figure, because I can't, of course, figure that out for you. I know what my all for Jesus is, but every one of us in this room tonight actually have a different all that God is probably calling us to, and something that he's saying, nope, now I'm ready for you to actually surrender that. That's the thing you've been holding on to that keeps you from being 100% completely sold out to me, so that I can do so much more than you can ever think or imagine. Because he obviously can't force us to be all for Jesus. So that's one of the things that came into my head. And then the other one was Patty. I thought of Patty. So she is just an amazing pastor. And she was actually the woman who drew me back into ministry. Like as I was running away from my dad's, legacy, I guess. And she started drawing me back into ministry and helping me to rediscover that God had actually called me to be a pastor. And this precious lady, all the time she spent with me and the love that she just showed to me, but this one particular night, she was showing me even more love by serving in my nursery on Christmas Eve. And I'll just never forget this night, because we had, I think there was 4 or 5 services that night. And so she's like, I'll come help you and I'll serve in your nursery for you. I'm like, that'd be great, Patty. And I walked into the nursery during like the 2nd or 3rd service, and she's like bouncing this baby up over her head. And the baby's, like just kind of hitting the air a little bit. And she'd re-catch this little kid. And all of a sudden, while the baby was up in the air, there was the biggest, most monstrous explosion of projectile vomit that I have ever seen. Like, yeah, Life Kids, right? This is a good push for life, serving Life Kids. Now, it was crazy. It was crazy to see this kid just like vomit all over her face. And I walked over there by her, and she's got vomit dripping from her chin and from her face. And all I could hear her, she was just whispering, all for Jesus, all for Jesus. And when Zach told me that you guys were doing all for Jesus, I'm like, oh, they have no idea what all might be. All might be quite a lot. So here's the question. What does all mean to you? And let's just talk about that, because obviously you have the answer, or maybe God has the answer, but you probably already know what you're holding back on God. We all know what the deal is. And so I'm going to just take us through a few of the things that God has worked on me in my life to allow me to surrender. And it caused like spiritual explosion to happen in my life. And then things that I see happen really routinely in the church, that when somebody finally breaks through and says all for Jesus, it changes the church. Because there's not a high likelihood. There is a 100% chance that the things that you are holding back on right now are actually holding Life City back. And when you actually let go and release your all for Jesus, that's why I was so excited when you talked about this year just saying all for Jesus. I mean, you should probably do this for the next 20 years, but we can't go wrong by being all for Jesus. So the first one I'm going to start with is the word consistency. And let me just talk to you a little bit about what I mean. Being consistent in what God has called us to do, because you guys all serve in different areas of the ministry, right? And so some of you are probably here every time the door opens, and there is nothing that's going to hold you back from being here. And then some of you are going to be held back from being here when the doors open because the mountains are so beautiful and you're just going to go mountaineering or something, whatever. In Oklahoma City, it's like just about everything. I mean, if it's raining too much, then there's going to be some of my leaders who just decide there's too much rain and it might actually hail. Does it hail here? Okay. It hails baseballs in Oklahoma City. Like, it's really ridiculous. Anyway, so I know I'm making my point, right? So but see, here's the thing. Consistency matters in what we give to God. And you have no idea what it means when you actually say to God, I'm all in. I'm all in, and nothing's going to hold me back. There's no weather. There's no playtime. There's no nothing that's going to hold me back from your house, which is the local church, which is God's plan. That's right. It's his plan A, and he doesn't have another plan, so he needs you to be consistent. So that was one of the first things that I saw that broke things loose. Now, here's something to think about. There are a lot of people who go to this church that don't serve. And one of the best ways to create consistency in their life is to invite them in to serve. And it creates consistency of them just being here and seeing what God can do through their life. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a second. But consistency is one of them that you can think about. The next one is treasure. And treasure is interesting because it's one of the last things that God's people will oftentimes surrender and say, all for Jesus. It's all yours anyway. And I'm going to give you everything that I have. And so it doesn't matter what I have. It belongs to you. And God, when you say give, I give. And of course, bringing the tithe into the house that's not even something we give, right? We're returning that because God is literally saying that belongs to me anyway. So, if you don't bring it back in and return it to me, you're a thief. So God's like pretty clear about that's something we're just expected to do. But returning the treasure that God has given us is so huge, and it makes such a difference. I want to tell you something that Megan and I went through when we were struggling with this. Now, granted, you need to understand, we were already pastors at this point. So this was probably, our third or fourth year on pastoral staff in St. Louis. And giving of the tithe was so difficult for us. It just freaked us out because we never had enough. And so we're just constantly saying, we don't have enough. We can't do it. And so basically we were thieves. Isn't that nice of us? We're so lovely. But anyway, we just decided, nope, we are absolutely going to surrender and say, it's all yours, all for Jesus. And I remember the weekend that this happened, but I was at one campus and my wife sings, so she was singing at another campus. Our kids were actually at a third campus, but we were all kind of coming together for Sunday after all the services were done and we were coming together to eat. We're sitting there at the table eating. And Meg says, well, I just want you to know that I put our tithe check in the offering today, but I did it very unhappily. which is, of course, not scriptural. And she said, I kept it in the back pocket of my jeans until the very last service, and then I dropped it in. Did it very unhappily. And I hope you have fun trying to get the car fixed, because in Missouri, you have to have a inspection in order for your car to stay on the road. It isn't that way in Oklahoma, but you have to get it inspected every year. And if it doesn't pass inspection, then you have to fix everything on that car, including your windshield and everything, in order to even get your license. And so you can't drive your car. So it's kind of a big deal. Like we needed that money. And so anyway, I just told her I'm a little bit happier than her sometimes. And I just said, that's okay, Meg. I was happy enough for the both of us. I'm so glad that you went ahead and put that tithe check in. And I remembered that I had forgotten my computer back at the church. And so I told her I'm going to have to drive back to the church and get my computer. And while I was driving back, I just prayed and I said, God, have fun fixing your car this week. Because if it belongs to you anyway, we already said all for Jesus. So if we're giving the tithe that belongs to you, the cars also belong to you. So have fun fixing that. That's great. And I walked into my office, and sitting on my computer, I hadn't seen it obviously because I forgot my computer. And so I'm sure it was there before I left, but there was a card sitting on my computer and it just said Pastor Stephen. And I opened it. You know what I thought? Because I flipped it over and on the back it said confidential. And I thought, somebody's mad about something. You know, sometimes that happens in church where people get mad at stuff. And I was like, somebody's mad about something and now I've got a mess to clean up. Fun, a confidential little letter. That's great. And so I opened it up, and on the front of the card, it said, I see all that you do for me. And I opened it up, and $300 cash fell out. And it said, keep up the great work. Love, Jesus. And of course, I don't think that Jesus actually wrote that card. I mean, if he did, I should have kept the envelope. But I know that somebody obeyed him. He prompted somebody to do that. And I just started bawling like a baby. I sat right there at my desk, bawled like a baby. And I think the thing I was crying the most over is that I realized he answered my prayer before I ever prayed it. I prayed it after I know that was already there. Is that not crazy? So when we surrender our treasure, that's a big piece of saying, God, I trust you in everything, because in America, we trust our wallet. We just do. And when it's not doing well, we're in a bad mood. And so when we surrender it, it's everything. It's absolutely everything. The next thing I want to share with you is, it's really discipleship. I call it next steps. But surrendering the ability to invite others into ministry, and surrendering the ability that each one of us have to spend our time leading other people to become fully devoted followers. We were talking about this a little bit last night, that it's such an amazing thing when a hand goes up at church and you celebrate that hand, and it's so wonderful, and we clap about it. Yay. And we should, because God just did something amazing. But he actually did something amazing all by himself. And then he's saying, now it's your time to step into the picture. I did my part. Now it's time for you to do your part. And it's called the Great Commission, right? And we go and make disciples, and we walk alongside those people that have raised their hand, and those people that we meet at the gym, and the people that we meet CrossFit, and the people that we meet in the restaurant, and wherever we are encountering people. When they give their lives to Jesus, the easy part's done because it's already done for us. And then the hard part sets in of time, taking the time to actually say, I'm going to surrender some of my time to walk alongside you for the next year while you develop and get your feet under you as a fully devoted follower of Jesus. And then they're going to turn around and do that very same thing. And that's actually called the multiplication of believers. And I don't know if you've ever, learned how to multiply. But if you have, then you know this is very exciting because Life Church will end out, you'll be busting out of this room if you truly disciple and you start multiplying believers. This room will not last you very much longer at all. It will never last very long, and you'll be moving into something much larger or opening up different campuses or whatever the heck God wants to do. But it is not just Pastor Zach's job to walk around during the service and after the service and invite people into more than what they're doing right now. And so many people actually get their mind twisted and they think, oh, like when I'm asking somebody to come and serve in Life Kids, or I'm asking somebody to serve on the host team or on the operations team, or wherever I'm inviting them to come and serve, we actually think that we're asking them to do us a favor. And it could not be further from the truth. We are asking them to step into the holiness and obedience of following Jesus every day of their lives. And the church is God's plan A. And there is not a plan B. So if we don't walk around inviting those who are not fully involved in what's going on here, then they have not yet discovered the true joy of what they can feel in their hearts every single day. I say that to you because I know you already know. You look forward to getting here, and you look forward to seeing what God's going to do, and you look forward to taking care of other people's kids, and you look forward to making coffee, and all the things that happen, all these weird things that God uses to see lives changed so we can start discipling. So you're actually pouring coffee so you can get a future disciple. That's going to be someone walking alongside you, and you're actually going to be looking for them, and you're going to be going to coffee with them every week for the next year. And it's wonderful because they actually turn around and do the same thing. And then you become a father of the faith or a mother of the faith. And then they turn around and get two, and you're a grandfather or a grandmother in the faith. There's a girl that I met the other day on our campus. She is in the 8th grade, and she's already a great grandmother in the faith through her discipleship. This is possible. It does not have to be something that we just wait to do. We need to be doing it right now and make the job of God a whole lot easier than him saving people to what? What is he saving them to? To walking around wondering how they can learn more about Jesus, and they maybe learn a little bit 1 hour a week when they come and hear from Pastor Zach or Pastor Craig. How unfair to either of those teachers that we're not doing our job. So it's super exciting to think about what God can do through us inviting people into their next steps, or us actually saying, it's all for you, Jesus. I will disciple. And that might mean that you need to be discipled first. And that's okay. A couple of years ago, just a little bit over 2 years ago, I was a pastor at Life.Church, and I discovered that I needed to be discipled. And actually, God helped me discover it. This is super weird, and just go with me on this. But I was trying to figure out if I even wanted to be a LifeKids pastor anymore, because sometimes, like I said, it drives me crazy. And I was like, maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. Couldn't figure out, God, where are you leading me? And our campus pastor at the time, Chris Beal, he told me, take a few weeks. Certainly don't take that time off, but please take a few weeks to be praying about this and let me know. So I was asking God, what's the direction for my life? And I was seriously praying about this. And God, I'm standing in the middle of the Life Kids lobby, greeting families as they're coming in. And at that time, we had some slides in our lobby. And God told me, go over. There's a man standing at the slides. He's looking at the slides right now. Go over there and tap him on the shoulder and ask him to teach you about discipleship. And I said to God, I don't want to learn about discipleship. Isn't that terrible? You really should never say that to God. And he said, go. And so I did. I obeyed, and I walked over, tapped this guy on the shoulder. His name turned out to be Brandon, and he went to our campus. And I just told him, very oddly, God told me to come over here and tap you on the shoulder, and you're supposed to teach me about discipleship. And he started crying, and he said, I've got a group of 6 other guys. And he said, we've actually been praying for over 6 months that you would walk up and ask me that question. How cool is that? And he went through one of my other associate LifeKids pastors, Katie, and myself, went through a year and a half of being discipled by that man, and have turned around and begun discipling many people at our campus. And there are so many people being discipled now because it's spreading like wildfire. And there's over 19 of our campuses that are active in discipleship now. We've got hundreds of people at our campus. And you know what's so cool about this is now, like, I was on the phone with a guy because he had like marked on his communication card that he gave his life to Jesus. And so I called him on Monday and I said, I'm just calling to celebrate that you gave your life to Jesus. And he's like, yeah, I was so excited. Can you believe I haven't been to church in 10 years? And he said, it was my girlfriend's birthday. And he said, we were like getting all kinds of plans made for the weekend. And my cousin said, could one of your plans be coming to 30-second theology? My pastor teaches with football commercials, and this is going to be super cool. And we said yes. That was the weirdest thing. We said yes. And he came and put his hand up and gave his life to Jesus. And then I got to call him and tell him, well, here's this little thing that we do. We actually want to connect you with another guy who loves Jesus with his whole heart. And he's going to walk alongside you for the next year as he teaches you how to become a fully devoted follower of Christ. Do you want that? Because obviously we don't want to make it available to somebody who doesn't want it, right? So I'm like, do you want that? And he said, are you kidding me? I want to get it right this time. And what's cool is because discipleship is spreading, we have people that are ready, waiting in line to take that role. And that's going to be you. That's going to be you too. You're going to be standing in line waiting. God, who are you sending to me? Who's my guy? Who's my gal that I'm going to then teach what it means to truly follow Jesus? So encouraging the next steps of God's people is super important. And then inviting. Are you guys ready for this? You're an inviting church, right? We invite everybody. It got a little weird with inviting during COVID, right? I don't know about you, but it got weird for me because, first of all, there was a portion of time I wasn't even outside of my house. So it would be super weird for me to invite Megan over and over. And then when I did get out, I didn't ever, like, COVID was like kind of I wasn't really too moved by it. Like, it didn't bug me a lot. So I kind of got out every day, but not a lot. But when I would, like, it would be weird to be inviting people. I've got a mask on, and I'm like saying, would you like to come to my church? And it was all weird. And so now things are breaking back open again. And I'm realizing, whoa, I have not invited in a while. And I'm getting back into the swing of things. And it's so fun to watch what happens. My daughter and I were at Walmart the other night, and I go to Walmart once a day. And so that's very fun for me. I know people are like, how can you do that? I'm like, I love Walmart. I just love it. But also you meet a ton of people who it's a great inviting tool, Walmart or Target if you're like cool like that. But anyway, my daughter and I were at Walmart, and I have this strict rule. I will not use self-check, because there's nobody there, right? So if you use self-check, it saves 14 minutes, but you don't get to lead somebody to Jesus. So but the other day, one of my LifeKids leaders said, hey, if you do use self-check, you can just ring something up twice, and then they have to come over there. I'm like, I know, mind blown. I'm really excited because it's going to save me a lot of time. But my daughter and I were there, and we ran into this lady. I just asked the question and just say, hey, do you go to church anywhere? It's my go-to question because you get one of two answers. You get, no, I don't, or yes, I do. And no one has ever told me anything else. No, I don't, or yes, I do. And when you get a yes, I do, then you're standing in the presence of another child of God. And you get to celebrate that moment. And it's super fun. Like the other day, one lady told me, she was like, I go to the Church of Christ. And you know what? I've never invited anyone to church. I don't think I've ever been invited. I'm going to start doing that. And so now there's going to be a whole bunch of people going to the Church of Christ because of me. And I'm super excited about that, that I can encourage the body of believers to start inviting people into God's story. But anyway, Olivia and I, my daughter, we were at Walmart and we ran into this lady and I asked her, And she said, I don't go to church anywhere. And she said, actually, my daughter has become a Christian and she's super crazy about Jesus and she's always praying for me and her dad. There was a reason why I was in her line, because I got to be beneficial to her daughter's prayers. And it was so cool. And nobody came. That's always fun too, when God just moves people out of your way and you can keep working. Nobody hit that line. And she actually showed me a picture of her husband who was getting ready what is today? This is Friday. Monday, he's actually having a pacemaker put in, but he's not strong enough for it. Not a believer. And I told her, give me his name. I'm going to be praying for him. And just the way that conversation went was so beautiful because she was so open to Jesus. And maybe it was the moment. Who knows? But God uses it if we just don't turn away from inviting everybody that moves around us. Now, I didn't always do that. And I actually made the mistake when I got to Life.Church. I hadn't ever invited anybody to church. I had already been a pastor for almost 9 years and had never invited somebody to church. Shame. It's unbelievable. And I got to Life.Church and they invite everybody. And I'm like, oh, so I don't have the gift of evangelism? I actually said that to one of our campus pastors, who said to me, don't you dare ever say that again, because if you are a follower of Jesus, you have the gift of evangelism. Isn't that something? And it actually convicted me. And so I just told him, I said, okay, I need you to explain to me how you do it. Because when I invite, not invite because I didn't, but I said, when I think about inviting people, I get super weird feeling. And I'm always afraid I'm going to make them feel super weird. So then we've got two super weird people feeling super weird. And I don't want that to happen. And he said, he had the same fear. And he said, here's how I conquered it. When I walk into Walmart or Target or any restaurant I happen to be eating at, or anywhere that I'm encountering people, and I'm walking up and I'm actually talking to somebody, I'm encountering them, I actually don't have any idea whether that person knows Jesus or not. I don't know. I can't just tell by looking at them, oh, you're a Christ follower. And I don't know, are they going to go to heaven one day, or are they going to end up in eternal hell? Which way are we going to go? And he said, so if I don't at least hand them an invite to my church and say, I'd love to have you come and visit Life City, if I don't at least do that, I might as well just walk away from them and say, I don't care if you go to hell. Like, it doesn't matter to me. And when he said that to me, clearly it moved him. Well, it did me too. And I'm like, I'm not going to walk away from total strangers and wonder if they're going to go to hell. But I'm not going to do what my dad did. And, we would go around knocking on doors and he'd say, if you were to die tonight, would you go to heaven or hell? We actually did that. And I knew I wasn't going to be that weird. And so that made all the difference for me. And it is literally no big deal to say to somebody, hey, do you go to church anywhere? And as soon as you get your answer and they say no, you can say, well, I go to Life City Church and here's an invite. And I promise you, God changed my life, and I'd love to see him do the same for you. And you will get the weirdest looks and you'll get joy, you'll get excitement. I tried it today. We went out to eat this afternoon, and I asked our server, I said, do you go to church anywhere? And he was like, yes, I do. And I said, that is awesome. And he said that he said when he's not working, he goes with his wife and his kids to some church about 5 or 6 miles from here, but I couldn't really understand what the name of it was. And I said, oh, I am so glad that you know Jesus, because that's really why I was asking you. And you already know Jesus. So then we have this connection already because I've got a Christ follower in front of me. And for the whole rest of the time, he was the sweetest. His whole demeanor changed after I invited him to Life City. And then I forgot my sunglasses. I had to go back. Forgot my sunglasses on the table. And when I went back in, he was standing there holding them. And he said, you know what? I'm going to come see you at Life City. Isn't that cool? Isn't that the coolest thing? Now, I don't know what his story is. I know he's a follower of Jesus, but I also know he doesn't go to church often. And I don't know how the story will play out. But it doesn't matter. I don't walk away from him wondering if he's going to hell, because I know he's not. So that's very cool. Are we ready to invite even more? than we've ever invited, right? To get that done. Obedience brings joy. So if you're ready to have an extreme amount of joy in your life, then just start obeying God in everything he asks. And this is one of the things he did ask you to be inviting people. He did. So then you can have a lot of joy. When I run into people who have anxiety, there's so much anxiety in our world right now. And when I run into people who have anxiety, I tell them, do you want to fix that? Because I do not have anxiety in my life. I'm like, do you want to fix that? And they were like, yes. Like, what do I do? I mean, they've already spent $248,000 on counseling. And I was telling them, start serving in the church and start obeying Jesus. And all the anxiety leaves. It leaves. It's so amazing. It's actually pretty exciting. You just obey. God does not have your life set out to be full of anxious feelings. He has your life set out to actually obey and do incredible things for him. So the last thing before we'll be done tonight, but I want to talk to you about your time and how you use your time, because this was the game changer for me. When I started being discipled, what I discovered was how to actually be a fully devoted follower of Jesus. And I'm super embarrassed to say this, but I actually did not like reading the Bible. I don't even like reading. I don't like reading. I don't like reading leadership books. I don't like reading anything. I was actually made in school. In school, I remember my mom made me, I was homeschooled and private school a little bit, but she made me read The Trumpet of the Swan. And I actually really liked that book and kind of cried at the end. And then I had to read Heidi, and I really liked that book too. And I cried at the end because I felt like I was losing a friend, So it's not that I don't like books, I just don't like reading. And then the Bible was just boring for me. Boring. And so anytime I'd try to read it, I was just really frustrated by it. So I didn't like reading. And then I did not like praying because that was boring too. And when I would pray, I would find myself either falling asleep or thinking about a million other things. And then I felt bad because I'm like, oh, sorry, God. Like I was trying to talk to you. And then now I'm thinking about ham, or something. Who knows what? And so probably Fig Newtons or Oreos. That's my thing. And so anyway, I didn't like doing either of those things. And then God started developing my spirit when I started getting discipled. And Life.Church has this thing that they call 10-10-10. And you might have already heard about it, but I call it the gateway drug to time with Jesus. But it's 10 minutes in God's word, 10 minutes in prayer, and then 10 minutes journaling back what you're hearing from God. And those 10, 20, 30. Oh, thank you. I don't do math either. So then those 30 minutes of amazing time with Jesus, you start longing for more. And then do you want to hear a super cool secret? If you actually ask God to give you a desire for his word and a desire for time with him, he does. And he answers that prayer because you are praying a prayer that he already wants to answer, right? Of course, why would he say no to that? And so when you're intentional to say, God, would you actually make me want to desire you, to desire time with you? And then God just started answering it, and my time with him started increasing, and I was spending more and more time in prayer and more time in his word. And it started changing me as a follower of Jesus, where I actually started hearing his word. Like I started hearing his voice. And my mom used to always tell me, she would say, he is the shepherd and we are the sheep. And the Bible actually tells us, my sheep know my voice. And so I had spent all this time like thinking, wonder why God won't ever talk to me, and, having a bad attitude about it. And then even wondering, was that God that said that to me, or was that the pizza I had last night? I just didn't know. I was never quite sure who was talking to me. And so God started changing me in my desires and in my time spent with him, but I actually had to calendar it in. So that's something I'm going to encourage you to do. If you are not a follower of Jesus who calendars time in your day to spend time with Jesus, I am going to ask you to put it in your calendar. Even if you start with the 10-10-10, so just calendar 30 minutes, I mean, you put a lot of other things in your calendar. I was embarrassed to look at my calendar and all the stuff that I put in it. Like my daughter pulled up my calendar the other day and she was like, whoa, that's a lot of stuff. Well, it's a lot of stuff, but also I have multiple times in my calendar with Jesus now, which is cool. And I've started this new thing. You might think about this, but Daniel, prayed 3 times a day. And so I was like, oh, I wonder what that would be like if I actually put it in my calendar that this is 10 minutes. I'm going to slip away and just spend some time either listening or talking. I'm super good at talking, so I have to work hard at listening to what Jesus has to say, but that's been a game changer for me as well. Listen to this. I actually read this morning. I was having my Jesus time this morning, and this popped up in the reading plan that I was doing. It says, most people today miss the voice of God, not because it's too strange, but because it's too familiar. They expect the Almighty to sound dramatic, bombastic, unmistakable, and a bit spooky. Isn't that something? But God oftentimes speaks to us through our own thoughts. He speaks to us through his word. He speaks to us through our own thoughts as we are meditating on his word, and then you'll think something. And here's a couple of things. If you want to jot these down, these would be a note worth taking. Here's a couple of things that when you feel like God has said something to you, as you're developing your spirit to listen to the still small voice of God, and you're wondering, God or pizza, if you're in that spot, here's a couple of things, a couple of questions you can ask yourself. Is this like Jesus? What he's asking me to do right now, is this like him? Because I know his personality. Well, is he a person? I mean, godality, whatever he is. You can just say, is this him? Is this like Jesus? And then another question I ask myself is, what is the worst thing that could happen if I get this wrong? What's the worst thing that could happen? And if you're listening to the voice of God and you're like, oh, that would actually be terrible, or that actually doesn't even go along with scripture, then you're not hearing from Jesus, right? But if it goes along with God's word and it might not be terrible, then it might be something you want to listen to and step into. I remember it was early Sunday morning and my mom woke me up. It was still dark outside. And she told me, she was like, Stephen, would you mind getting up and going with me down to Park Plaza? And this was an old abandoned hotel in our city. And my parents used to go down there. I told you we went door to door, right? We used to go down there every Sunday afternoon and we would have street meetings out in the parking lot of this old abandoned hotel. There was no electric, no sewer, anything, but every one of those old hotels were filled with homeless people. And so she told me, she was like, God woke me up and he's asking me to drive down to Park Plaza. And I told her, okay. So I was 9 years old. And so we get in the car and off we go. And this is like my mom's a pastor's wife and there were 7 of us kids. I was one of 7. And so that's a lot to do on a Sunday morning and be to church on time and to sit on the front row because we always walked in and sat on the front row. And so it was kind of amazing that my mom said yes to God that morning. But she said, we're driving to this Park Plaza. And I told her, what are we doing when we get there? And she's like, I don't know. I'm still listening to the voice of God. And we pull up and she said, we're supposed to go to door number 9. And I'm like, okay. So we got out, still dark, spooky, by the way. And she knocked on this door and you could hear like somebody coming to the door and the door snapped open and there's, the little chain that goes across the little hotel doors. So the chain popped and you couldn't even see the person on the inside, but we just heard this lady say, who is it? What do you want? Like that, just real super grumpy. And my mom said, God told me to come and knock on your door. That's what she said. She just said, God woke me up and told me to come and knock on your door. And the door slammed shut. And I was like, oh, now we've done it. So embarrassed that we were standing there and we had made somebody mad when it's still dark outside. And then you could hear the chain start moving. And that chain came undone. And Carol, who we now know as Carol, was standing there, having already slit both of her wrists. And she stood there in tears and said, I already told God, if you are real, if you're really real, then go ahead and send somebody right now. Right? This was a 9-year-old boy experiencing this kind of obedience, because I stood there and thought to myself, what if my mom would have said no to God's prompting? Like I told a guy the other day, he was being particularly annoying. And I told him, if you keep up this behavior, how many people won't be in heaven because of you? You know, because annoying Christians are super annoying. Disobedient Christians, very annoying. So anyway, I just stood there shocked at what I was experiencing. And Carol went on to give her life to Jesus. She led her husband to Jesus. God changed their life so significantly. They weren't homeless anymore. He was able to land a great job. They led her sister to Jesus. Their kids were changed forever. I can't tell you how many generations have been affected now by that one step of obedience of my mom getting up in the middle of the night, super weird situation, and obeying God. She could have said, oh, I think it's probably the pizza I had last night, right? She could have. So sometimes we're going to have to do weird things. But if we want to say all for Jesus, and we want Life City Church to be honored by a group of obedient followers of Jesus that say yes every time God says go, then that's going to be the result. The result is going to be that obedience always brings about the perfect will of God. Now, don't get me wrong. If you say no, he's probably going to move on to the next more obedient Christian. I mean, I don't know how he could have saved Carol in that situation, but I know he will move on. So, but don't be a wimp. Just say yes the first time and go after the one. One last story before I finish up. In this change that was happening to me of falling in love with prayer, I was spending time in prayer. It was on a Monday morning, and I had just gone into one of the rooms at church and just spent about 45 minutes in prayer. And during that time, I was just listening carefully. God, what do you want from me today? Like, what is your plan? And all of us have jobs. And the reality is if God's plans get in the way of your job is safe. It's in the hands of God. So if God's asking you to do something that gets in the way of your normal routine, then go for it. But I remember that particular morning, it was that still small voice in your thought. And I heard God say, I'm inviting you to go along with me. I'm going to go after the one. And what I thought of in that moment is, I don't know if any of you all remember this picture, but there was a painting of Jesus like reaching over a cliff for that one lost little lamb when he had left the 99. It was like an oil painting in our house. And well, I'm sure it wasn't oil, but it was, a replica of. And so the Jesus was like leaning over, trying to grab this one little lamb. And I actually imagined myself in that painting with him. I'm like, you're asking me to go along with you? We're going after the one. We're leaving the 99. We're going after the one. You're asking me to go. And I could see my face like peeking over his shoulder, kind of like looking at this little lamb. And I'm like, who are we going after, God? And he told me, Kyle. We're going after Kyle. Well, Kyle was a man who had just met Jesus like probably 2 or 3 months before that at Life.Church. And I met him because he came walking in after all of our services were done one weekend. And he said, I just wanted to bring my tithe in. I had to work all weekend, so I couldn't be at church. He worked out in the oil fields. And he said, I couldn't be there, but I wanted to bring in my tithe because God asked me to begin obeying him in the tithe, and I'm not going to miss it. So here it is. Got to know Kyle through that and started discipling him and watching what God was doing in his life. And I actually realized when God asked me to go along with him that Kyle, I didn't remember seeing Kyle in quite a while. And you know how people can come and go and you just miss them, or you don't miss them and you feel super bad about it. That's terrible, right? But all of a sudden I realized I haven't seen Kyle and Morgan in quite a while. I remember the day that they realized God didn't want them living together. They were living together and they were like, the Bible actually says we're supposed to get married. Let's get married. And I remember having a destination wedding in the jungle with them. I'm like, they were like, where can we get married? I'm like, you want to have a destination wedding in the jungle? So we did. It was great. It was great. It was actually at that wedding where I used Pastor Craig's iPad, and I did ask his permission, but I forgot to set it where it doesn't like go off or something. So then it went off in the middle of a service. That's not fun, right? Anyway, we had the destination wedding, super cool. But I was so excited to go after Kyle. And so I walked down to the office and I told my associate, LifeKids Pastor, I'm like, get me Kyle and Morgan's address because God invited me to go with them. We're going after the one. And she told me, now, what are you going to do if you get there and Kyle's going to be at work because he's on the oil field and it's just going to be his wife there? What are you going to do if that happens? And I'm like, would God ask me to go along with him if Kyle was not going to be there? Would he do that? And she was like, probably not. I said, okay. So we got the address and I went and knocked on the door and he answered the door and he said, Pastor, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm coming after the one. Jesus invited me to come along with him. He said he was coming after you. And here I am. I'm just along for the ride. And we walked inside and he just started pouring out his heart of what had happened, of all these changes that God was creating in his life. And then he said, I got back to the oil fields and all my same behaviors came back. So I'm doing all these things again that I wanted to be changed from and different. And Satan just crept in and said, you're not enough. You're not good enough. Jesus can't really change you. You didn't do it right. And is telling him all these lies. And then here's Jesus coming after the one. And then the garage door went up and Morgan came walking in. And she sat there and wept as they rediscovered the obedience that God had called them to in their life. And they're no longer at the OKC campus, but God called them to Kansas. Now they're in one of our campuses there. And he leads the Loop and she leads host team. And God is doing incredible things through that family. They're now discipling other people in Jesus' name because God went after the one. So believe me, Life City, God is ready, standing ready to use you more than he is right now. He's ready to use us in ways that will blow our mind if we truly do say all for Jesus. So that's the question. Do we really say all for Jesus? Are we really going to say that? Because it'll change us. It'll change us so much. Can I pray for us? God, I just want to thank you so much for this group of people, a room full of mighty warriors that they're at church on Friday night, God, ready to be fired up and learn more and more about you. God, these are the people that you are going to change the world with. And I thank you for every one of them. I thank you for their obedience that they have already had in their lives. And I thank you for the obedience that is going to come out of their lives after tonight even more. We love you, Lord Jesus. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Thanks, man. Yeah.
Come on, let's give some honor and love to Pastor Stephen. Man, you guys feel fired up? Encouraged? I was looking at Rally and I was like, man, what's right in the middle? All right there.